The Velvet Throne. Mr. Simpkin decided to run away from home, but not for 12 hours. When it was dark, he would sneak out of bed and tiptoe down the stairs. Well, Gobble wouldn't know. He'd be asleep by then, snoring as usual. The kettle began to whistle. Mr. Simpkin hurried into the kitchen to make Gobble's coffee, just the way he liked it. 4 spoonfuls of sugar, cream, not milk, stirred 5.5 times, no more, no less. The toaster suddenly popped. Mr. Simpkin snatched the toast and buttered it. He had to hurry. Gobble hated cold toast. He was fussy about his food. The boiled eggs were ready too, all 9 of them. Each egg had a little woolen hat to keep it warm. "Hurry up, idiot!" Gobble called from his bedroom. Oh, he was awake. He didn't like to wait for his breakfast. Mr. Simpkin's hand shook. He hurried into his brother's bedroom. "Here it is," he said nervously. "Everything's just right." Gobble tried to sit up in bed. He was very, very fat. The bed sagged. It groaned and creaked. "Help me up," ordered Gobble. "Don't just stand there like a fool." Mr. Simpkin put the tray on the floor, and then he tried to heave Gobble up onto his pillows, but he couldn't. His arms were too thin. His muscles were too small. He went red in the face as he heaved and strained at the bulging body. Gobble pushed him away. "Useless, absolutely useless," he grunted as he pulled himself up. With shaking hands, Mr. Simpkin put the tray on the bed. 12 pieces of toast with jam," he said, "and 4 pieces with orange marmalade, your favourite." Mr. Simpkin smiled at his fat brother, but the smile soon fell from his face. "Idiot!" yelled Gobble. "I ordered 12 pieces with orange marmalade and 4 with jam." He picked up a slice of toast and threw it at the wall. For a moment it stuck there, glued to the wallpaper. Then it slid down slowly, leaving a jammy trail behind it. "Clean that up," shouted Gobble, "and then bring me the newspaper. You always forget the paper." Mr. Simpkin scurried off to fetch a sponge. Yes, Arnold," he whispered. Gobble's name wasn't really Gobble. It was Arnold, but Mr. Simpkin always called him Gobble in his mind. He was too scared to say it out loud, but it made him feel better. He smiled to himself. Arnold would be furious if he knew. Mr. Simpkin opened the door of the flat and walked down the stairs to fetch the paper. There were 15 flights of stairs. He ran as quickly as he could to fetch the paper. He still had to make his own breakfast and then rush off to work. He didn't want to be late. While Gobble read the paper in bed, Mr. Simpkin prepared his own breakfast. He wasn't allowed to eat the eggs, or the bread, or the cereals. He took out a can of sheep's eyes and opened it. Last week while shopping, he had bought a tin of sheep's eyes by mistake. He thought they were oysters. Gobble was furious. "You bought them," Gobble shouted, "so you eat them." Mr. Simpkin opened the can and shook the contents onto a plate. The horrible wobbling eyes slid out with a slurp. They seemed to be staring at him. Oh, the smell was terrible. Mr. Simpkin was hungry, but not that hungry. He just couldn't eat them. He put the plate in the fridge and walked towards the door. "Goodbye, Arnold," he called. "It's payday today," yelled Gobble. "Make sure you come straight home with the money and don't open the packet. I don't want you wasting our wages on rubbish." No, Arnold," whispered Mr. Simpkin. He crept off to work. Gobble had never had a job. He just lay in bed, eating chocolates and watching television while poor little Mr. Simpkin slaved away at the fertiliser factory all day. At the end of every week, Mr. Simpkin handed his pay packet over to Gobble. Now, if Gobble was in a good mood, he'd sometimes give Mr. Simpkin a few dollars for himself. Mr. Simpkin just made it to work in time. He spent all day filling up fertiliser bags. It was hard work. He grew hungrier and hungrier. His stomach rumbled. At lunchtime, he had nothing to eat. Gobble wouldn't let him have any money to buy food until he'd eaten the can of sheep's eyes. He was too scared to tip them down the drain in case Gobble caught him. "Aren't you having any lunch?" asked Tom Richards, the foreman. I'm not hungry," said Mr. Simpkin. He wet his lips and watched sadly as Tom scoffed down his sandwiches. After work, Mr. Simpkin collected his pay packet and walked slowly home. Gobble would stuff the money in his pocket. He would tell Mr. Simpkin to eat the sheep's eyes for tea. He would fill his face with jellies and cakes while Mr. Simpkin watched. The rain drizzled down. Mr. Simpkin walked more and more slowly. He thought about his plans to run away. Why wait until tonight? Why not run off now? Keep the money. It was his money. He could start a new life, get another job where Gobble couldn't find him. He could go to a motel for the night. Oh, Gobble had thousands of dollars in a tin under the bed. It was all the money that Mr. Simpkin had earned. He wished that he could get some of it, but he knew that Gobble wouldn't hand it over. The streets were full of people rushing home. It was cold, but Mr. Simpkin smiled to himself. He tore open his pay packet. The dollar bills were folded neatly. They were all his, every one. It made him feel terrific to own his own pay packet. He would do it, he decided, straight away. He would go to a motel and book in. He would order an enormous meal. Gobble could eat the sheep's eyes if he wanted. The thought of it made Mr. Simpkin chuckle. A motel, that's where he would go. But first, he needed to find a toilet. All of the excitement was making him nervous. He needed to go to the loo. Nearby was a park. Mr. Simpkin ran across the wet grass. Soon he was surrounded by trees. It was growing dark. Where was the toilet? There was one around here somewhere. There it was, under the trees. A blue stone building, like a jail. Mr. Simpkin looked at his watch. 2 minutes to 5. He found the men's sign and hurried in. Someone had written on the wall. There was scribble everywhere. Mr. Simpkin didn't read it. Graffiti usually said rude things. He tried not to look at the scrawled writing, but he couldn't help himself. Just above his head was scribbled, 1. This joint gets locked at 5. There was a loud clang and the sound of a key turning. At first, Mr. Simpkin did nothing. Well, then he realised someone had shut the gate and locked it. He rushed over to the iron gate, and it was fixed with a chain and a padlock. Hey, he called out softly. I'm in here. He was too embarrassed to shout. He heard footsteps disappearing. Excuse me, he called softly. Excuse me. The footsteps disappeared. No one answered his call. He was alone, locked in a public toilet on a cold and wet night. He plucked up his courage. Help! He shouted. Help! 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 The park was silent. The toilet was silent. He looked up at the roof. Only one lonely light globe glowed in the dark. Oh, there was no way out. He was trapped. The night grew colder. Mr. Simpkin shivered and drew his coat around himself. Help! He yelled again. Help! 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 The rain dripped silently. There was no answer. He knew no one would come till morning. He looked around for somewhere to sit. The floor was wet and cold and he was hungry. He started to look at the graffiti. There was another bit and it said, 2. The best seat in the house. An arrow pointed to one of the cubicles. Mr. Simpkin gave a weak grin. Someone had a sense of humour. He followed the arrow into the cubicle and gasped. The toilet seat was covered in velvet. The pan shone like gold. The cistern button was a diamond. The toilet was more like a throne than a loo. This was crazy. Why would anyone put such a wonderful seat there? Vandals could wreck it in no time at all. He stared around the cubicle. There was another piece of numbered graffiti. It said, 3. No standing. Suddenly, Mr. Simpkin felt an urgent need to sit down. His legs seemed to make him walk. He shuffled forward and sat on the velvet-lined toilet seat. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. Well, he thought that he couldn't. Maybe he'd been feeling a little tired. Yes, that was it. Suddenly, something scuffled in the gloom. He stared at the corner. A shadow moved and scudded. Mr. Simpkin's heart froze. Little bumps spread across his flesh. A rat. He hated rats. He lifted his feet off the ground. "A shoe," he said softly. "Scat!" The rat scurried into a hole. The minutes ticked by. Mr. Simpkin sat watching for the rat, but there was no sign of it. After a while, he noticed more number graffiti. There was another piece of writing scrawled above the toilet roll holder. It said, 4. Rock and roll. More jokes. He stared at the toilet roll holder. It moved. He was sure that it moved. It gave a little jiggle. Mr. Simpkin shook with fear. Something strange was going on. He wanted to get out of this loo. Someone was playing jokes, and they weren't funny. The toilet roll began to jig, back and forward, up and down in a regular beat, like a musician tapping his feet. It was jigging to silent music. It was beating out a tune. Mr. Simpkin thought that he'd heard it somewhere before. He was sure it was an old rock and roll number. Without warning, the jigging stopped. Even though it was cold, Mr. Simpkin began to sweat. He was trapped, like a rat in a crazy toilet. He tried to figure it out. There was something strange about the writing on the wall. The first bit of number graffiti said, "This joint closes at 5," and it had, on the dot. Nothing strange about that. But the next one had pointed to the best seat in the house, and it was the best seat. And the weirdest. And then there was the no standing sign, forcing him to sit down. And what about the rock and roll paper holder? It had started to rock and roll, it really had. Or was it just the wind? Or the water pipe shaking it? Oh, Mr. Simpkin had the feeling he was going out of his mind. But then, if you are mad, you're the only one who doesn't know. And he was wondering whether or not he was saying. So he couldn't be mad. Or could he? "Get a grip on yourself, man," he whispered. His voice echoed around the lonely lavatory. There was only one explanation. He tried to push the thought from his mind. He tried to stop thinking it, but the unwanted thought wrinkled its way into his brain. The graffiti was coming true, acting itself out. Everything written on the wall was happening. Mr. Simpkin's hands began to shake. He rushed over to the lock gate and shook the bars. "Help!" he called. "Get me out of here!" Water dripped and pinged, but there was no reply. He shouted and yelled and kicked and screamed, but the empty night gave no answer. Slowly, he walked back to the velvet seat and sat down. He closed his eyes tightly. He didn't want to read the walls. He was too terrified to think about it. A sound disturbed the silence. A hinge creaked. Loudly. Mr. Simpkin opened his eyes and stared. The cubicle door slowly swung outwards. There was a big space underneath the door. Just above the gap was scrawled, 5. Beware of limbo dancers. Another joke. But Mr. Simpkin didn't laugh. His lips were frozen in a bewildered grin. His tongue was stuck to the roof of his dry mouth. His eyes bulged. Music began to play. It sounded as if a whole band was playing inside the toilet. An invisible orchestra. He knew the tune, the limbo rock. Da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da. Da, 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 da. It surged and swelled, rocking and a rollicking. Da, 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 da. Suddenly, a dancing, swaying line of people filled the empty building. They seemed to appear from nowhere. They wore crazy hats and blue party squeakers. They clapped their hands and kicked their feet. The line swayed and swerved and approached the cubicle door. One by one, the partygoers leaned back onto their heels and passed under the open door. They ignored Mr. Simpkin. He was like an uninvited ghost at a banquet. Well, he sat still, terrified on his velvet seat as the line came back for another limbo. Without warning, A gust of wind slammed the door. It banged loudly. Mr. Simpkin winced and closed his eyes. When he opened them, the line of dancers had disappeared. He was alone once more. Silence replaced the music. What was going on? Oh, what? Was this a nightmare? Every bit of numbered graffiti was coming true. What else was written there? People wrote terrible things on toilet walls. He looked above his head. 6. Drowned in the dunny at dawn. Mr. Simpkin shrieked. He jumped off his velvet seat and stared down into the water. "No," he shrieked. "Not that! No! No, no!" He ran over to the corner, as far away from the pan as he could get. He squatted down on the floor, curling himself up into a tight ball. He closed his eyes and refused to read any more. He tried to sleep so that he could wake from this dreadful nightmare. But sleep wouldn't come. He crouched there, not moving, as the minutes and hours ticked by. His stomach rumbled. His legs were stiff. He thought this ordeal would never end. But at last, the first rays of sunlight crept through the iron gate. Dawn. Mr. Simpkin shook. He looked around for a weapon. There was nothing. His eyes rested on a shape moving along the top of the wall in the empty cubicle. It was the rat. It crept forwards. Oh, Mr. Simpkin crouched down. What if the rat leapt at him, flew through the air with bared fangs? It was better not to wait. He stood up and waved his arms. "Shoo!" he yelled. "Scat! Buzz off!" The rat was startled. It reared up on its back legs and slipped. It fell, tumbling into the velvet toilet. With the speed of a cobra, Mr. Simpkin lunged across the floor and pressed the diamond button. The rat disappeared in a gurgling flush. Mr. Simpkin slumped down. The writing had come true. The rat had drowned at dawn. He wondered what else was written. It was no use putting it off any longer. He searched the walls for more numbered graffiti and found one more piece. It simply said, 7. There's no place like home. Without warning, there was a clang. A key turned in a lock. An iron gate was thrown open. Mr. Simpkin took one last look around his prison and fled. There was no sign of a gatekeeper. Who had opened the door? He didn't know or care. He was free. He fled across the park. There's no place like home. Oh, you can say that again, he thought to himself. If he hurried, he could get back before Gobble woke up. He could make Gobble's breakfast especially tasty. He would hand over his pay packet. Gobble might forgive him for taking a night off. Well, if not, well, he would just have to take whatever punishment was dealt out. Anything would be better than spending another night in that terrifying toilet. Running away had to have been a big mistake. He was hungry, starving. After he had fed Gobble, he would make himself a nice meal of sheep's eyes. Mr. Simpkin stopped running. He walked slowly, with heavy steps. His shoulders were hunched as if he carried a great burden. Suddenly he stopped and turned. He started to run back across the grass. The gate of the toilet was still open. He hurried inside and looked at his watch. 2 minutes to 7. He felt inside his pocket and found what he was looking for, a blunt pencil. He took it out and carefully wrote on the toilet wall. 8. Gobble disappears forever at 7 o'clock. Mr. Simpkin hurried home. He burst into the flat. "Gobble!" he called. "Are you there, Gobble?" There was no reply. His brother was nowhere to be seen.